I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents.
On a special mission, some local heroes return home.
The students, the firemen, the wounded warriors, they were all talking and laughing and just having a nice time together.
A couple of popes are on the path to sainthood. We'll get a guided tour.
And he's in the running, how one man made a marathon a mission for education.
Everybody in their life has a Mount Everest, has something that they always wanted to do, but perhaps had something holding them back.
Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. Well, a group of students from Bishop Kearney High School recently got an education that they would never have received in the classroom. They traveled down to Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington to meet with wounded soldiers.
We had a chance to catch up with these young people to find out what they brought the injured veterans and what they took away. Have a look.
The purpose of the trip was to let the students see the effects of war on a personal level. They wouldn't just see numbers or just see political effects of war. They would actually see the people involved and know the sacrifices that they've made for them and that their families make every day for all of us.
When you first walked in and you saw all of the soldiers, and most of them were in wheelchairs or very seriously injured, and just seeing that they had been so hurt to help us keep our freedom.
Some of them didn't have legs, some of them didn't have arms, none of them were cut and bruised, and it amazed me how compassionate they are and how they're not, regretful that they went to war.
It was kind of hard to see, but it was worth it.
Initially, when they walked in the room, you could see there was a little tension when they first noticed some of the men and some of their injuries that they had.
We met a man who was prisoner of war 5 times, men who had been shot and wounded, that I just never expected to be so difficult and so emotional. And I knew it was physically going to be hard, but I never realized how emotionally hard it was too.
The prisoner of war, he went in about 200 pounds, and after 6 days, he was 135 pounds because they starved him. And yeah, basically they shocked him and beat him up and, electrocuted him.
One of the wounded soldiers was in a wheelchair and he was missing a leg, and he had his little son that could have been no older probably than 2 sitting on his lap, and the little boy was so excited to be there, but his dad was injured, and I don't think he realizes that his father might not be able to help him with some of the things that most fathers do with their children.
I tried to make them comfortable, saying just speak to them and speak to them as a person and get to know who they are.
They were just so happy to see young people visiting them and bringing them cookies and singing, and it was just very touching.
We were having the Christmas party, and all the girls were sitting around this one man talking to him, and he started out with 3 girls listening to his story, and he wound up with almost 20, and it wasn't just girls doing it because they had to. You could tell that they wanted to be there.
The students, the firemen, the wounded warriors, they were all talking and laughing and just having a nice time together. The firemen and the wounded warriors got along great. There was a lot of camaraderie between them. The firemen were the first soldiers on the ground on 9/11, and they feel a special bond with the military, and the military feels the same way about the firefighters.
You think you just go and fight and that's it, but what they saw every day, and they were getting shot at or something was about to happen to them.
But I think some of them, if they could, they would go back.
And I realized that little problems that I have and complain about are not worth complaining about anymore.
So I think it showed them the present effects of war and the past effects of war, and how each individual deals with it differently, and that they do deal with it, and together, when they were shown support, that they can overcome some of the tribulations that they endured.
Well, some very powerful stories there, and you can tell it's something that really resonated with the students.
Sure did. Well, stay tuned. There's much more current straight ahead. When we return, we have the day's headlines, including a new legal battle in California on gay marriage.
Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime. Coming up later, 2 popes are headed for sainthood. We'll tell you about the process of actually declaring someone a saint.
But first, let's get a look at the day's headlines. Same-sex marriage has been a controversial topic at the ballot box over the last few years, but the next decision on the issue will come from a federal judge. Opening arguments were heard today in California in the case of two gay couples who are challenging Proposition 8. That is the gay marriage ban approved by California voters in November of 2008. Proceedings are expected to last at least a couple of weeks. Reports say no matter the outcome, the case is expected to be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. And that decision could become a landmark ruling on the rights of gays and lesbians to marry. A Ugandan lawmaker who introduced a bill that would impose the death penalty for some homosexuals is refusing to withdraw the bill, despite criticism from the U.S. and some in the Catholic Church. Parliament member David Bahati says he feels the anti-homosexuality bill is necessary to keep Uganda's children from being, as he puts it, recruited into homosexuality. Uganda's Catholic bishops have called for the death penalty to be dropped from that legislation. Several American politicians and clergy have made similar statements. More attacks on churches in Malaysia. Christians there are protesting and calling for peace and unity after the most recent attacks. 3 churches were hit by firebombs Sunday as religious tensions flared. Another church was splattered with black paint. The attacks follow a December court decision allowing non-Muslims to use Allah to refer to God. Many in the predominantly Muslim country believe allowing Christians to use the word Allah will confuse some Muslims and could cause them to leave their faith.
This year's March for Life in Washington, D.C. will include, for the first time ever, a stop at the White House. Organizers say they will hold a 2-hour rally at Lafayette Park just across from the White House on the eve of the march to demonstrate their pro-life stance to the president. Reports say tens of thousands of people from all over the country travel to Washington each year for the event. It will be held on January 22nd, which is the anniversary of the 1973 Supreme Court decision in the case of Roe v. Wade. Well, the world is raving about James Cameron's newest film, Avatar, but the Vatican, not so much. The Vatican's newspaper, the Roman Observer, has slammed the film, calling it another anti-imperialistic, anti-militaristic parable with little true emotion. The paper also said the film is bland and has no cutting bite. Even so, the film has grossed an estimated $1.3 billion worldwide so far this year. And finally, St. Francis College has a new vice president for development, and it is someone with a familiar face to many people in the Brooklyn Diocese. Thomas Flood has been a guest on Current several times, and he's probably best known to viewers as the executive director of Brooklyn's Alive in Hope Foundation, where he helped raise money for a variety of causes. In his new role with St. Francis College, Flood says that he will focus on encouraging the alumni and friends of the school to give the gift of education to future generations. And coming up a bit later, we'll meet another leader from the Alive in Hope Foundation. That's Craig Katinas. He's helping students achieve their goals in a very unique way.
Indeed he is. But for now, stay tuned. There's much more Currents coming up straight ahead.
Coming up, we'll discuss what it takes to be a saint and examine the cases of 2 popes. Welcome back. Well, just before Christmas, the Vatican announced that 2 of the most influential popes of the 20th century would be moving one step closer to sainthood. They're Pius XII, who was pope during World War II, and John Paul II, whose pontificate was one of the longest in history. They were both declared venerable by the Vatican.
Yeah, but what does all of that actually mean? And to get some perspective on the process of becoming a saint, I spoke by phone just before the holidays with Father Robert Barron. He's the founder of wordonfire.org. Father Barron, thank you so much for joining us today on the phone. We appreciate your time, sir.
My pleasure.
Well, I know that it's a very complex issue, but Pope John Paul II, Pope Pius XII, among those moving one step closer to sainthood. Can you explain kind of just in layman's terms the canonization process?
Yeah, the Church is always very careful when it comes to declaring someone a saint. It takes its time, and it goes through several stages. So when the process begins, someone is called the servant of God. It means that they're being taken very seriously as a candidate for canonization. The next step is one that we're at now. Someone's declared venerable, which means their life has been examined, and the Church determines that, yes, they've exhibited what they call heroic virtue. They're looking especially at the virtues of faith, hope, and love, I think, the theological virtues. And they're saying that this person exhibited those virtues, but in this remarkable and, I think, exemplary way. That's very important, too, that they see see them as examples for the whole church.
Right.
So that stage we're at now with Pius XII and with John Paul II, there are people who live the Christian life heroically in a way that will be a model to the whole church. The next step is beatification. Someone's declared blessed, and that comes through the ratification of a miracle. So when the church determines, and again it's done very carefully, they have a committee that looks at these reports of miracles, and on the committee are agnostics and people outside the church, but who have medical expertise. And they look at these cases and determine that, yes, this cure cannot be explained medically. When one miracle has been affirmed, the person can be beatified. When a second miracle is confirmed, they can be canonized. So that's the very slow, very deliberate process the church uses to determine whether someone's a saint.
Sure. Okay. Well, great. Now you said that the process is usually very slow and very sort of determined. Do you think that John Paul II is his process moving along faster than many others have?
Well, that's certainly true. It is moving faster than others. Pope Benedict waived the usual 5-year waiting period after the death of someone before they even commence the process. So normally, John Paul has been dead now just shy of 5 years. Normally, his process would just now be getting underway. So Benedict waived that and moved it up. I think that was partially due to the enormous popular acclaim for John Paul. Remember at his funeral mass, all those signs saying "Santo subito," make him a saint right now. So it was the people's way of saying we really are convinced this person's a saint. I think that groundswell of support led the Pope to waive the 5-year waiting period.
Gotcha.
But still, I would say, nevertheless, the church has taken its time. Nevertheless, it's looked at his writings, his letters, it's examined his life very carefully before it makes this move. And he's not, of course, canonized yet. He's just been declared venerable.
Right, exactly. Now, John Paul II did declare more saints than all of his predecessors combined. How do you think Benedict XVI compares to that so far?
Well, I think he certainly slowed it down. There were some claims that Benedict, while he was Cardinal Ratzinger, felt that John Paul perhaps was moving a little too quickly with declaring all these saints and blesseds. I think John Paul said we need a lot of models in the life of the church, and he's right about that. But I think Benedict has moved a bit more cautiously and a bit more slowly in the process.
Right. What about Pius XII? Were you surprised by his being declared venerable? I know it's kind of caused maybe a bit of a controversy among some groups anyway.
Yeah, it's a complicated question, isn't it? I was surprised, frankly, because I just had not anticipated that he'd be declared venerable. I'm not surprised when you look at his life. I think Pius XII was a very remarkable figure, and especially on this controversial matter of Pius XII and the Jews during the World War II. I think you look carefully at the record, he does exhibit an awful lot of truly heroic virtue in regard to the protection of Jews. I do think Pius XII has been the victim of a kind of a smear campaign over the past many decades that has really overlooked his very real accomplishments in regard to the protection of Jews. One thing I find very intriguing, is the leading rabbi in Rome during World War II became a Catholic. He became a Catholic just as the war ended and took as his name Eugenio, after Eugenio Pacelli, Pius XII.
Wow.
That's a pretty strong tribute, isn't it?
Yeah.
Someone who is very close to the situation on the ground, and he knew how much the Pius XII had done for the Jews. So I think that's what the church is looking at and confirming.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, Father Robert Barron, founder of wordonfire.org, thank you so much, sir, for your time today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Good being with you.
Thanks. Well, Father Robert Barron there of wordonfire.org. And I'll have a closer look at the papacy of Pius XII and the controversy surrounding it coming up on tomorrow's show. And here to talk about that with me tomorrow is going to be Monsignor Guy Massey, who is the Vicar for Ecumenical and Interreligious Affairs for the diocese. And he, of course, is someone who knows a lot about this, a lot about the controversy surrounding it. And so he'll be great to talk to tomorrow.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. We'll learn about all of what it does take to be a saint,
right,
a little bit more about this particular controversy, because I know it's something we've talked about and alluded to in the past,
right? And
we haven't really gotten real deep into it.
Exactly. That's exactly what we'll do. We'll get down to the nitty-gritty, as it were.
Sounds good. Stay with us. There's more Current straight ahead.
When we return, going the distance for Brooklyn's kids. We'll meet a marathoner eyewitness.
The money that I was raising for the marathon I was thinking maybe a family's going to be helped by this.
Well, it's a couple of weeks after Christmas now. Have you written all of your thank you notes?
No.
Okay, well, you better get on it. And one institution that many can be thankful for here in the Brooklyn Diocese is the Alive in Hope Foundation. Over the last decade, it's awarded over $20 million in grants, and much of that money going to school children to help with their education.
It does. Funding this sort of operation takes a lot of legwork, though, and the race for dollars is really more of a marathon than a sprint.
Right.
Nobody knows that better than Craig Katinas, who works for the foundation, and he shares his story as tonight's eyewitness.
Everybody in their life has a Mount Everest, has something that they always wanted to do, but perhaps had something holding them back, whatever life circumstances they may be. Running a marathon for me was definitely that. Since 1998, the establishment of the Alive in Hope Foundation has been able to distribute out $23 million in grants and resources to the parishes, programs, and services throughout Brooklyn and Queens. Everyone here is here to do one thing, to serve the greater good of the community. I wanted to run the New York City Marathon to raise resources through the Bishop Scholarship Program for our Catholic schools to provide low-income families opportunity to send their children to Catholic elementary schools in Brooklyn and Queens, which is an excellent alternative to some of the schools out there. I'm a product of the Catholic school systems in Brooklyn and Queens. I started at Our Lady of Snows, then St. Gregory's and Archbishop Molloy High School. And all of them had one thing in common. They were excellent schools for me to learn everything that my parents hoped that their children could learn. The teachers like Sister Paula and Mrs. Brewer and Mrs. Gary. I mean, how can you remember these names? You remember those names because they had a profound impact on you. And that tells you something. I was a pretty decent runner. In college, I actually became a little bit more than average, a little bit above average. I started getting better and better and more competitive. In one of those races, I unfortunately hurt my knee pretty bad. Medically, they said it was going to be pretty challenging for me to come back from. The big sight for myself was, could I one day get back to a place where I could even run a marathon, which was so far out of the realm of possibility at the time. Having the cause to run for, that was the best inspiration at the most difficult times. Some of my running routes, I'd see the parish, I'd see the school, and the money that I was raising for the marathon, I was thinking maybe a family's going to be helped by this. The first people I saw were my parents and my brothers, and how funny was it to see the first people were the people that made the sacrifices for me. And I thought it was wonderful at the end, the last mile, to see my wife, who's been nothing but so supportive of me and the mission that I'm so passionate about. What's been pledged to date has been over $10,000, which is extraordinary. There's a higher calling, there's a higher purpose of why we're here. And I really, truly believe that St. Paul got it right with that comparison of a spiritual journey to that of a race. Throughout life, there's going to be turns, there's going to be hills, there's going to be obstacles spiritually and in reality. So whereas I'm putting in all those miles physically for the marathon, I think everything that was taught to me through Catholic schools definitely gave me the tools to be prepared for the next obstacle that came into my life and may come into my life tomorrow.
The Alive in Hope Foundation, one of the most fond memories that I have of December is when we went to the Alive in Hope Foundation luncheon that the bishop was hosting, and watching the video that they had put together that showed the people who are helped by the donations that are given. And it was just really moving and touching.
And to have, there was actually a family there, a mom and a son, who were tremendously helped by the Alive and Hope Foundation and the money that they raised. And they actually got to meet the folks who had donated money to the Alive and Hope Foundation for them specifically. It's just a great thing that they do here in the diocese.
It is, and it's interesting to see the variety of people that come out to support that.
Yeah.
One of the people is Michael Monaco. He runs Porterhouse in New York. It's a big restaurant over at Columbus Circle. And it was so funny because I met him and he said, well, you have to come in for dinner sometime. So I emailed him and I said, sure, I'd love to. And he goes, all right, next week. So I get to get a free meal out of it, two free meals out of it now.
Yeah,
I get to have dinner twice.
He was the big, gave the big speech at the opening speech at the dinner and everything. It was great. It was wonderful. It was a good time. And of course, for a great cause. I mean, the Alive and Hope Foundation, as we've said. And one thing that I do want to mention, too, is that we said it earlier in the headlines, Tom Flood, who is going on now to St. Francis College, who's worked with the Alive and Hope Foundation for so long, has done a great job, a great guy. We've both had the chance to meet with him here on Currents, and so I just want to wish him all the best.
Wish him well, absolutely. We will miss you there, but we'll see you over at St. Francis.
Right.
Well, that is it for this edition of Currents. Coming up tomorrow, a hazard to your kids that may be as close as their cell phones. We'll look at the problem of pornography being delivered by phone right to them.
Well, in the meantime, remember, you don't need a TV to watch Currents. You can always catch us online. We're right there at currentsny.net. Until next time, thank you so much for watching. I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime. Have a great night.